Welcome to the What's Next Longevity Business Academy. I'm Fred Fishkin, co-host with Mary Furlong of the What's Next Living Longer, Better, Smarter podcast. In this Academy session, disseminating innovation, what stakeholders are thinking about. Our moderator is Richard Eisenberg, managing editor and senior web editor at Next Avenue. Our presenters are Lawrence Kosick, co-founder of Get Set Up, John Reinhardt, entrepreneur in residence at the NIH National Institute on Aging, Eric Ross, head of mergers and acquisitions and venture capital at Nationwide Ventures, and Mary Furlong, entrepreneur and president, Mary Furlong and Associates. During the Academy session, if you have questions for the panelists, please submit them via the Q&A feature on your screen. Mary and co-producer Sherry Snelling will have a few words to get things started after this message from AARP Innovation Labs.
AARP Innovation Labs is always searching for big ideas and the right people to transform markets and change lives. We offer early-stage startups an opportunity to accelerate their core business, identify new opportunities, and ultimately tap into the massive $8.3 trillion longevity economy. We sponsor and host pitch competitions, collaborate and co-create with startups and well-known accelerators, and forge alliances with communities and industry leaders. Once you are part of the AARP Innovation Labs family, you will have a host of offerings at your disposal. Early-stage innovation tools and services, including design thinking consultation, consumer insights gathering, market research, and analysis, cross-functional coaching, including business strategy, marketing, and product development, real-world pilots with strategic partners, a network of commercial partners for business development, a potential financial investment. We are committed to working with startups to advance AARP's social mission and empower people to choose how they live as they age. Visit aarpinnovationlabs.org.
So it's really exciting to be here today to talk about partnerships. And I'm very grateful to AARP and AARP Innovation Labs because they've been our partner for 18 years. We've been working together. And I've been partnering with a lot of the people on this panel. And so I'm grateful to you, Fred, and I'm grateful to you, Sherry, our co-producer. So Sherry, let's talk about why the Academy. And
Sure. Yeah. And thank you, Mary. And I'm so excited to listen to today's session. We're saving the best for the last 2 weeks, I think. But for those of you who are just joining us, the Academy, we really established it to create learning objectives on a variety of different topics that are helpful in the longevity economy for your business, but also for your personal career. And so we have 8 different weeks of sessions. And you can still access those through July 31st with your registration pass, as well as the boot camps, which are 15-minute quick topic sessions that are conducted by thought leaders in on that topic. And so with that, one little incentive for those of you who are joining us today. If you join us today and you also join us next week, which is our last Academy session, we will do a random drawing on the names that attended to have a free ticket to the Venture Summit, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. And Mary will talk about that later after the session. Thank you, Mary. Back to you.
so one of the best lessons I've learned about partnership is make your partner more successful than yourself. So start with your partner's goals. And Richard, you always seem to make us more successful when you're part of this. So over to you.
Well, thank you, Mary. And hi, everybody. I'm Richard Eisenberg, the managing editor of Next Avenue. That's the public media site for people 50 plus, where I'm also the editor of the Money and the Work channel, Money channel, and the Work channel. I also co-host the podcast Friends Talk Money for people over 50. So in today's What's Next Longevity Business Academy session, we're going to be talking about the power of partnerships, a stakeholder review. And we have 4 terrific experts who Fred introduced, but I'll tell you a little bit more about. Eric Ross is the head of mergers and acquisitions and venture capital strategy at Nationwide Ventures, and they've facilitated 32 partnerships. Lawrence Kosick is co-founder of the very successful new startup Get Set Up. They reskill older adults who then teach other older adults, and his company recently won a Top 50 Disruptors Award. John Reinhardt is the entrepreneur in residence at the National Institute on Aging, which I think is really cool, and a serial entrepreneur specializing in the longevity economy. And Mary Furlong, who I think you probably know, is the creator of the What's Next Longevity Business Academy and happens to know a thing or two about partnerships in the longevity economy. So each of our three panelists is going to talk a little bit about what they do, how they make partnerships work, and then I'll ask them some questions. Then Mary Furlong will offer her perspective, and we'll finish with your chance to ask our panelists questions or offer comments. So please put them in the Q&A, and I'll look for them and ask as many of them as I can to our panel. So let's start with Eric Ross from Nationwide Ventures. Eric.
Yeah, thanks very much, Richard and Mary. So as Richard mentioned, I lead the M&A and venture capital team at Nationwide. We're about a $50 billion financial services company. If we go to the next slide, the corporate venture capital team is the tip of the spear for Nationwide's innovation efforts. So we bring an outside-in view of the world and help accelerate our business partners. And as a company, we tend to focus on how we can continue to support our members with extraordinary care for the next 100 years. And so the venture team really does three things. We invest in companies that we believe can have a material impact on our company's value chains, whether that's product underwriting claims and companies that live our mission of protecting people, businesses, and future with extraordinary care. We drive insights. So, we spend a lot of time in the innovation ecosystem, like here today, and we meet with many people. So we try to harness those insights and help provide guidance to our senior execs in the organization. And finally, the most relevant topic for our discussion today, we develop partnerships that co-create and accelerate our current businesses and bring new solutions to market with startup companies. So, this is the really how can we work with them to drive material impact for Nationwide and also bring value to the startups. So the 1 + 1 = 3. Go to the next slide. A little bit how we think about the world. So we're a thematic investor, and a lot of the topics here that you see is, I'm sure most of the folks watching here are very well aware, right? We have some major trends in play, and we're trying to think about how we take a look at those trends and combine them with our current solutions and come up with better holistic ways that we can help our members live in retirement. So, a couple of facts, right? 10,000 people turning 65 every day. We'll have 98 million folks over 65 by 2026. We know that Americans are underprepared for retirement, with 46% of those going into retirement not expecting to have enough money. 3/4 of Americans want to age in place. And we know that there will likely be a demand for caregivers, and there will be a shortage. And so, a lot of that work falls to family members. And so when we think about how we can combine these things together with the financial products that we offer, so, what are the novel holistic financial solutions that consider health, finances, and lifestyles? So that's, advisor and broker facing solutions that provide aging in place resources, asset decumulation platforms, home liquidity solutions, tech-enabled elder care. So, non-intrusive activity monitoring and predictive solutions, care coordination technology, social isolation solutions, a lot of the things that you hear if you've gone to, Mary's conferences, all these things. So what we're trying to do is surround our members with these solutions that help them live comfortably in retirement. And the final slide, talking about partnerships, just wanted to highlight two of the companies that we've invested in that we're looking to partner with the enterprise. And so the first is Vesta Healthcare. It's a care coordination technology platform. We invested in the company in late 2019. We introduced Vesta to our business development team in the life business in 2019. And we see an opportunity to bundle, these types of solutions with our long-term care products. And we've had several conversations and continued development of those efforts, and finally in discussions to finalize a pilot with our LTC product. And then on the latter here, a company called New Retirement, which we invested early last year, right before the pandemic. They are a decumulation platform. So how do I manage my assets, from the time of retirement throughout my retirement? We introduced them to our retirement solutions, our thought leadership, and our annuities teams in early 2020. And, with many of those folks focused on, how we think about helping, whatever, if it's our, 401k plan customers, how do they manage their assets and think about getting through retirement? And so, several partnership opportunities there, and we continue those efforts as we go forward, as this is a big problem, right? That how do we think about managing folks in retirement and their assets? So,
Well, thanks, Eric. Let me ask you a couple of questions. I'll start with the pandemic. You mentioned that. How has the pandemic changed the way you find and do partnerships and your focus? And now, how are things changing now that we're starting to get into the new normal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, if I think back early in the pandemic, investors like us, the first thing we did was really, focus on the portfolio, try to make sure that folks had enough, cash on hand to sort of weather the event. And so we spent a lot of time with them. We also, provided them subject matter expertise. So we connected them with our chief economist, helped them to get a really good view of what was happening and what they could expect over the next, 12 months. And I'd say, so the legacy of this, of flipping to the virtual, right? So everybody here went to conferences, right? And you go to flip to virtual events like this one. I did the same thing on diligence and meeting founders. And so, that became a big part of our life. So meeting folks through our founders and our ecosystem partners, became a critical component of getting through that cycle. I think one thing for us is we try to focus on getting to know founders, well in advance of cutting a check. So, good news is we knew a lot of the teams that we made the investments in over the last year, but there are a couple that we cut checks with founders that we didn't know pre-pandemic. So, a lot of time in that virtual space. And I'd say, the other thing from a partnership perspective, similar challenges from the business units in that, they took a lot longer to engage because we were internally focused, in the first part of the pandemic, but even that legacy is still there. So, very focused on cost cutting and being digital and focus on the end consumer, and then how, to integrate with the partners, I think has been a very important point for us to try to help educate our founders into how to work with the business. And I'd say it you can still see that continuing today, as we were just talking before the panel here on travel and how and when will travel come back. We're scheduled to do some trips towards the end of the year, but right now, continuing in virtual. And probably the ultimate thing for us is we really try to spend social time with founders and get to know them really well. One of the questions that we ask is, would we work for them? And so it's difficult to do that over video only. But so we're looking forward to actually getting back to face-to-face interactions.
And one last question before I turn to Lawrence. I wonder, Eric, if you could just talk a little bit about sort of the nuts and bolts of how Nationwide does its partnership. So I know it's more than just giving money, but what's something that's been effective for you in making a partnership work?
Yeah, so we, with our portfolio companies and even with startups that we don't invest in, but we really feel strongly about their solutions, we guide those companies into the business. We typically will engage the business partners in the diligence phase to try and create some relationship there. So we're sort of a BD arm for those portfolio companies, and really try to make sure that we can not only provide the capital, but provide and manage the introductions into the business. And we try to get, facilitate an ownership of the business itself with the startup company, because really they need to have skin in the game as well, and they need to form that relationship. And so that's probably our main goal, is to make sure that we can make a connection there to a champion to help them, move that effort forward.
Great, thank you. And I'll be back when we get to the part where I'm going to ask questions for all the panelists. But let's turn over to Lawrence Kosick from Get Set Up. Lawrence?
Thanks very much, Richard. Mary, Sherry, pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Lawrence Kosick, the co-founder of Get Set Up. We are an interactive learning platform for older adults, a safe place for older adults to learn, to connect, and to share. So we started Get Set Up a little prior to the pandemic, because we believed it was an important opportunity. It was a big problem. We, the founders, had personal and professional reasons, AKA old family members. We believed that we could help solve this problem of an incredible digital divide for such a large portion of not only the US population, but in countries around the world. We believed that, every generation or every demographic has a place online where they can go to learn, to share, and connect, except for older adults. We didn't think there was a very good solution. And we experienced that in our everyday lives with our families as we tried to be sort of their tech support and help them with the things that they needed to learn to live healthy, happy, more connected lives. And so we set out to solve the problem in a different way. And that was helping older adults, teaching, reskilling older adults who could then help other older adults do the things that they needed to do. So it was true peer-to-peer learning, and rising tides, we believed, would lift all boats. And in the very interactive way we approached this problem, we believed that we were not only solving this digital divide, but we were also creating a really important opportunity for them to socialize and be less lonely, particularly during the pandemic when isolation became very, very prevalent. So partnerships were actually quite critical to our growth. And we believed right at the outset that if we can put a business model around a problem, it self-funds and it creates sustainability, right? It forces us to have the discipline to provide an essential service that at least at some point we're able to monetize. We knew early on that a B2B approach for our business wasn't going to be sort of a shorter, medium-term reality. And what I mean by that is we're helping older adults in many cases get online for the first time or overcome maybe a fear and anxiety of learning some new tech. That's also the same user customer that's probably not going to pull out their credit card, swipe it, and buy a subscription of classes. And so we realized that if we were going to sort of create a business here, we were going to have to go to the businesses and the organizations that truly cared about that demographic. And so that meant talking to the area agencies, the states, the local governments, the membership organizations, senior care facilities and organizations, and of course the Medicare plans. And so what we did is we created branded e-learning channels for these different membership organizations. We curated classes from our master catalog of 500 classes. They would choose the 50 to 100 that they wanted to offer to their members or users, and they'd get to do it in sort of a branded experience. We'd offer full customer support, analytics, and whatnot, so that our curriculum could now become theirs and something that they could offer to their member users. And so in the end, that allowed us to grow quite quickly. We were able to grow like a B2C company by sort of removing the friction by not putting up a paywall to somebody who desperately needed to take a class or to learn something new. So it was comfortable and easy for them to get into a class. But we grew through partnering with organizations, so B2B2C, who would subsidize the cost of these classes for their members and their users. So partnerships were absolutely key. So to give you an example of some of the folks that we partnered with, they are area agencies in 26 different states. They're the YMCAs across the country. They're Medicare plans, and they are states at the state level with Health and Human Services in states like Michigan, New York, Washington, and many others. And being able to help solve the digital divide for these populations became incredibly important, and partnering with them so that we could make it easy for us to offer our curriculum to their populations or members or users is again what allowed us to grow so quickly. We not only did this in the United States, but we made the early decision that this was a problem not only here, but everywhere else in the world. And we would select different markets internationally. And 6 months ago, we launched in India, other parts of Asia, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and Canada. So the benefits that we were able to provide our partners to make it a win-win is by providing sort of a large curriculum of virtual learning, particularly when everybody is stuck at home and during the pandemic. It was good for retention. It was good for loyalty. It was good for their member engagement. It was good for member health because they could exercise at home. They could learn to cook healthy recipes at home. They could manage their anxiety. They could learn how to meditate. There was so many important things that they could learn to do. And we could provide it to our partners, members, and users. And this, we felt quite strongly, make it as easy to do and as accessible as we possibly can, particularly over the last year when services like this were really quite critical. And so positioning ourselves to our partners as a platform that made it easy to provide their members and users onboarding, health literacy, and really a complete virtual education platform has been what has in large part driven our growth. So partnerships absolutely critical to the growth of our business over the last sort of 15, 16 months. So let me wrap it up there, turn it back over to Richard and see if anybody's got some questions.
Thanks, Lawrence. Let me ask you this. I wonder if you could give an example of how you partner with Medicare plans and what makes those partnerships work for both sides.
Sure. So if you think about Medicare plans and what they offer, it's a very, very competitive space. Anybody watching TV between October and December sees, you know, a lot of advertising around the different benefits between plans, and positioning Get Set Up as a supplemental benefit that plans can offer their members so that they can stay engaged from home, they can take exercise classes from home, they can learn how to manage their chronic illnesses from home by accessing all of these classes virtually, is something that the plans understand and believe that they can provide as a benefit. So in the same way that they offer, say, silver sneakers, they can offer Get Set Up as a virtual benefit for the health and wellness of their members.
I guess I'll follow up with one last question on that, and then I'll turn over to John. I can see sort of the natural partnership between, say, silver sneakers and Medicare plans because it's about health. I wouldn't normally think of learning and technology as a Medicare benefit, and I wonder if you can explain sort of why that makes sense, and is that sort of does that take a while for people to understand, or do they say, oh, that's great, this is really something I'm looking for, and now my Medicare plan's going to give it to me?
Yeah, that's a great question, Richard. No, so the pandemic has completely changed the way Medicare plans think about providing services to their members. Because if you look at it over the last year, people who have a silver sneakers benefit have not been able to go down to the local YMCA or 24-hour fitness to do any exercise. So how do they age in place and stay healthy at home? Well, they can take classes around how to meditate, how to manage anxiety, how to eat healthier, cooking healthy recipes, doing chair yoga, all sorts of different exercise classes. Of our probably 500 plus classes, I would argue at least half of that, so at least 250 classes are health and wellness related. And that allows the health plans to provide this as a benefit to members when they can't get out and get to the gym all the time, or when they have available time and they need to learn how to think or manage a chronic illness, meditate, manage anxiety, cook something healthy. Those are all classes on the platform that allow them to live healthy, happy, more connected lives.
Well, thank you. That's fascinating. And I bet the people taking the classes like taking the classes from people who are like them too.
Exactly right.
Let me turn over to John Reinhardt. John, tell us what you're doing at the National Institute on Aging and what kind of partnerships you're doing there.
Yeah, thanks, Richard, and thanks, Mary, for having me. And I enjoy being with such esteemed panelists. So what I'll first do is clear up the acronym. SEED is Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development, which to me was fascinating as I thought about it from a serial entrepreneur perspective. You know, what is the government and what is specifically the National Institute of Health doing about entrepreneurial development? Obviously, Alzheimer's is a big focus, but aging research is really a global topic to cover a number of areas we focus on. So let's go to the next slide. The monies for the programs and the distribution of investments in companies is a non-dilutive investment as congressionally mandated. This will give you the set-asides from the federal budget that go to two programs that primarily are our distribution of funds. The first one is Small Business innovation research, the SBIR grants, research grants. That involves commercialization that could involve a researcher, but the other one is more specialized, the small business technology transfer. So we refer to them as the SBIR grants or STTR grants. The STTR grants, the differential is it's a partnership with a U.S. research institute. So it's a university that specializes in research. The SBIR could have a researcher, but it could also just be a company. We only fund companies that are U.S., formed in the U.S. and based in the U.S. Next slide. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about in terms of dollars, this gives you a little bit more description. We're early stage investment in research for two value propositions. The main value proposition is a contribution to science and research and new knowledge. The secondary deliverable is commercialization of those to improve health and well-being and to drive opportunities for company development. The numbers are pretty astounding to me. If you think about it, NIH gives away at 1.2 billion annually, or greater than 1.2 billion. It's a percentage. The NIA division, which I'm in, the National Institute on Aging, our total contribution to companies and through these grants is 132 million. There are 27 institutes in NIH, of which the National Institute on Aging is one of the 27 institutes. Next slide. So we partner in a number of ways. I'll just highlight the ones that I think are most important. The first one is my role. My role is I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm what they call an entrepreneur in residence. Last year, the NIA federal team, the group that I work with, they developed a program to have two entrepreneurs, one that has specialized more in life science. I specialize more in digital health, to basically be a resource to the portfolio. So we're not federal employees. We're actually in the market and we're part-time. So part-time, we're actually in entrepreneurial endeavors. Let's see what happened. Sorry about that. My screen went blank. So the second thing is that what we do is we actually work with the portfolio companies on the commercialization aspect. So after the research aspect's over, post research grant, we partner with them. We partner in 4 areas: devices, diagnostics, therapeutics, and digital health, or what I call age tech. To give you an idea on the partnership, we also partnership with the companies directly. An SBIR grant can be up to $300,000 if it's non-Alzheimer's related. It goes to $500,000, and this is for a phase 1 grant if it's Alzheimer's related. The phase 2 grants start at $2 million for non-Alzheimer's and $2.5 million if it's Alzheimer's related. So we partner with a number of startup companies in the portfolio. I'm actively working with 9 or 10 right now. One of the other partnerships we do is with organizations like Mary Furlong and Associates and the Thrive Center in Louisville. We're trying to increase the number of applicants that come to apply for these grants. A lot of these grants are available. A lot of people don't know. So the educational partnerships to instruct them on how to apply for the grant goes along with how we provide guidance to do the applications. And then the funding, we also do targeted funding for special interests. And that will be a special topic that may come up, like diversity, cultural diversity in the workplace. And you'll see some number. We only do grants twice a year on a formal deliverable. Next slide, I think, is my last slide. Yeah, and this is just information about how to get more information on what we do at NIA, and I'll turn it back.
So John, we had a winner that came out of the NIA group last year for our 10K competition. And I think we have 3 companies exhibiting. Exhibits are open and you should exhibit for the Venture Summit. But I know that 3 of your portfolio companies will be presenting there. So I have a couple of slides, I think. Oh, Richard, should I turn it over to you for a question first, right?
Yeah, if I could, that'd be great. John, I guess I wonder, what's the best way for an entrepreneur in the longevity economy to go about partnering with the National Institute on Aging? And can you give some guidance as to what NIA is looking for, what you're looking for?
So the idea of the special funding request are an outlined almost like an RFP proposal on what the application has to cover. In terms of the biannual submissions, it's a broad range of topics. Again, from therapeutics to devices to, I think it's all really about the research value, the structure of the research, what the outcomes are expected to be. And in phase 2, it's definitely about including the commercialization aspects. But I think it's wide open. I don't think it really has. I've worked with a number of the portfolio companies that do a broad spectrum. In terms of reaching, I think the last slide will give them some sort of website reaching. But I also have come to learn that there's 3 national NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovation in the country. So their acronym NCAI. And then there's 8 REACH organizations. Kentucky's lucky. Kentucky has a REACH organization. It's a partnership with University of Louisville and University of Kentucky, and that stands for Research Evaluation and Commercialization Hub. Because what we're finding is if you've never applied for a grant and you're not a researcher that's accustomed to grant writing and grant submission, it's a daunting process. So we have an educational series, we have a training course, and then we have these centers that you can walk in the door and get started. And the key is don't be scared by the commercialization. Just come in with a sound solution and a sound proposition, and then the system can qualify you to the applicant. And the applicants are obviously scored, and if you don't make it the first time, you continue down the process.
Great, thanks so much. Mary, back to you.
Several years ago, Lori Bitter and I were asked to help a venture group take a look at what is the longevity market ecosystem. And we developed this chart that shows that there are nonprofits that often have the trust with the customer. So when you partner with a nonprofit, that really helps an entrepreneur build trust. There are the associations and advocacy groups. And this year, more than any other, we've seen the federal government play a role. I think it's the first time we've ever seen the words caring economy and infrastructure combined together. I'm happy to say that there are more investors at all levels, angel, seed, corporate, family office, than we've ever seen before, and government stepping up, just as John described. 2 of our competition finalists went on to get grants from the NIA. And then, as Eric shared, a large number of corporations that are leveraging their corporate profile. And so at this academy, we made an attempt to go through in the next slide and identify some of the companies that have participated in the academy and will participate in the Venture Summit. So I like emerging markets. I liked the internet when it came together. It was difficult because not everybody understood all the players in the internet market. And this jigsaw puzzle of the longevity market is one that evolves with every single conversation we have. And so we're pleased to see ARP Innovation Labs and N4A, and now N4A's partnership with so many nonprofits. CABI's been an amazing resource to bring to the table. Last week we had NCOA talking about their brand pivot here. We've had Us Against Alzheimer's on the session. At the very beginning, we had people from the government, from ACL and NIH, and then of course John here today, and Home Instead and Kindred. In the upcoming Venture Summit, we'll have Best Buy Health, and an anchor venture investor has been Ziegler Linkage. And now my slide is a little blocked here, so I can't see all the entrepreneurs, but a lot of them are on the panel, and there's even more to come. So we see our role in helping to write a glossary of terms. So when we hear these words, we now have a glossary on our website, but we're also gathering and refining this picture, this jigsaw puzzle of who's helping to go to market. And I'm excited to say that it's a rising market. So I know Lawrence can talk a little bit about his growth in Asia and India. And We can see the amount of deal flow. Eric, I'm sure you've looked at as many deals this year as any year before. And then John, how wonderful to have your background as an entrepreneur now helping these entrepreneurs. So that's just a little chart that might help you adapt and think about who you're working with. And I'm always surprised and interested when an entrepreneur tells me that they go on LinkedIn and they find the seniors blue book in their area, and then they meet that person, and how they often build locally and then they discover the national associations. Part of the reason why we produce the Venture Summit in June is to connect with the venture community. But in December, we do the Regulatory Summit because it's increasingly important to know all the different stakeholders in Washington and how they're innovating and coming to the table around this marketplace.
Mary, which types of partnerships do you think work best? You've seen a lot of them over the years. Give us some sense about what's impressed you.
The partnerships that work the best are when both sides listen to the other and really listen. And when they say that, you know, we have a nonprofit, it's been around for 25 years, we have distribution, we have access to the customer, and this is what's going to take for us to do due diligence on you in the nonprofit side. And then when the entrepreneur calls me on the phone and says, Mary, this deal's not going to happen for a while, they're going to have to do all this due diligence. But in fact, they have to do that to manage their trust with the end user. That said, I've never seen such a bull market with entrepreneurial nonprofits who understand that they can get the solution to their customer faster. They need to be more tech savvy. So they're moving faster. So if you look at the first quarter revenues of entrepreneurs this year and fourth quarter last year, you see a lot of government money that has come into them. So everyone's moving faster. What is a disaster is when they don't listen and they want to go at their speed without paying attention to that. And I also love it when entrepreneurs are creative. So Jeff Simmons, one of the most creative entrepreneurs, he's done deals with PBS that he loves to talk about, where being on PBS and getting access to that large audience where they gave away the product, but they built that awareness. So deals can take on different aspects, I think.
Thank you. I've got a bunch of questions, but I know we have a few from the audience. So let me take a few of those send them on to the panel, and some of them I know have answered them in Q&A, but I'd like to raise them here so everybody can hear the answers. And I'd like to invite other people watching now to please submit your questions in Q&A, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. The first one was a very basic one. It was for Eric, but I think it's probably a good one for everybody, which is, how do you prefer to be contacted by entrepreneurs? So Eric, why don't you start, and then after that, Lawrence, and then John.
Yeah, so I shared my email. It's simply rosse7@nationwide.com. That's probably the best. Now, I will say it takes me a while to get through my email, so be patient. I will likely have one of our folks on the team take a look at whatever you're providing as a backdrop to.
And then once you do see the email and you want to follow up, does that happen through email, or do you have a Zoom conversation or a phone call?
Oh no, yeah, of course. So yeah, if we do like it, we'll take a look at it. We'll do some research on our side. We will balance it against our thesis work that I mentioned earlier. We'll set up an introductory call. If that goes well, we'll pass it to our business partners to get their take on it. And if everything works through there, we'll get an initial conversation set up with the business partner as well, and that kind of kicks off things.
And one last question on this, Eric. Realistically, roughly, how long should entrepreneurs expect it should take to hear back from you, whether it's good or bad, just so they don't nudge you too much, but also they know what to expect?
I think a couple of weeks on the email is probably, normal. I would say, after the initial meeting, it's also, a couple of weeks. I guess, one thing I will say, we do tend to operate a little slower. Mary just mentioned this. It's because of all the processes that we have inside the company. And so, yeah, that's usually, and we try to be as responsive as we can, but it does take time sometimes.
Sure. And Lawrence, how's it work for you? How should people contact you, and what's the process after that?
So I'm clearly on the other side of the table from Eric. So usually when people are trying to reach out to me, it's usually for partnership conversations. And so I'm often as eager to talk to them as they are to me. So email is a great way to reach me, just lawrence@getsetup.io. I have people that reach out to me all the time on LinkedIn, and I try to be as responsive there as I can. But I move them to email as fast as I can and try and get a conversation set up. So that's the best way to catch me.
Okay, thank you. And John, how about for you?
So for the NIA direct contact, it's NIA small business at mail.nih.gov. I work directly with the portfolio companies. I'm also out on LinkedIn. It's fine. You can get a hold of me at jreinhardt@biohealthinnovation.org, which is the contracting group that we work with at National NIH. And I'm happy to get back in touch with you.
Thank you. There's a question that just came in. What are some of the best ways for entrepreneurs to build awareness among potential partners, including distribution partners? And that's open to anybody.
I like publishing research. I think if you have a white paper or research that positions you in the market, that's really good. And one thing we've learned from NIA is how strong their research partners are of the entrepreneurs they work with.
Yeah, to add to that, we have a pretty distinctive protocol that we're kind of templating to get us the insights we need to the companies. But one of the things that we've developed is the entrepreneurial series, the education series. So we've broken down each of the pieces of the understanding of the business. Could be governance, could be incorporation, could be business model, it could be IP protection. But right now what we're doing is we're developing a longevity economy understanding, because I think the way to get noticed is to have acumen in the conversation that the market. And I think a lot of people just say, hey, aging's aging. And that doesn't begin to talk about the acuity levels and the changing conditions and people living at home. And, the basic thing for me is if you understand who's the customer and then separately understand who is providing the revenue, those take you a long way to a good conversation, because that gives you credibility.
I'm not sure whether every trend in the longevity economy would necessarily lend itself to partnerships, although maybe they would. But I wonder, is there a particular trend or two for all of you that you think especially lends itself to partnering, and why would that be? Anybody?
I think for Nationwide, it's a lot of the aging in place technology, right? We're a financial services company, and so any of these solutions that are targeted towards addressing some of the the issues that we've outlined here today, we are not going to be the creator of these things, and we're focused on our core now more than ever. And so for us, any of these sort of ancillary areas that we know provide good opportunity to partner, that's where we're going to focus. We'll focus on our core. The startups and entrepreneurs will focus on what they do best, and hopefully together we can bring a better solution to market.
Lawrence or John, anybody want to?
Sure. I think it's really quite hard to build a successful business in this space without partnerships, because if you look at the landscape, there's very few businesses that have reached any sort of significant size or scale addressing this audience. And so you need to think about, where there has been some interesting impact with organizations, maybe the AARP or Health and Human Services or the Medicare plans, like where they've been successful at reaching this demographic. Figuring out how you can partner with some of the folks in the ecosystem to get your idea, product, or service out there faster seems actually quite critical.
And one of the reasons I think this is an exciting space is because you've got home care, you've got senior housing, you've got aging in place. Those are all different sales models selling into that. But don't be afraid to partner with a home care company at the regional level. Make that a big success. That news will spread fast. John and I serve on the Thrive board together, and they will tell one another, oh, this really works, you should try this. So once you get into one of those channels, it'll spread within the channel.
I think the other thing that makes this really interesting, Richard, is the communities themselves, their models are changing, right? So it's not only, I agreed with Eric, it's the aging in place, the smart house, the age where you want to be, the AARP model, the AARP mantra, but the communities themselves are having to market to a different kind of consumerism that is not leading with quality of care. They're leading with quality of life. And the care is a component, whether it's telehealth or remote monitoring or whatever. And so I think this life and social determinants, I think those will become bigger parts of all deliverables. And to do that, if you're really good at a product or service, the wrapper around social determinants and quality of life is really well delivered with a partner looking to distinguish their branding.
I want to ask a little bit about partnering with government, and I want to ask Lawrence and John, but Eric, feel free to join in too if you like. The I guess traditional belief is that it's impossible to work with government because state and local and national, because there's just so much bureaucracy and red tape and rules, and it just takes too long. So Lawrence, you've been successful at that. I wonder if you can give our audience a tip about what makes a successful partnership with governments, and what are you doing right that allows you to do it? What can other people do to try to do the same thing? And then on the flip side, after you do that, John, I'd love to hear you say, what's the best thing people should know about trying to work with the government? So Lawrence?
Sure. I mean, it absolutely takes some time to penetrate, local and state government. But in this category, it's worth it, right? Because if you look at the way sort of the money flows from the federal government into the different states, right? Department of Aging and Health and Human Services, and then either gets pushed down either to Medicaid, the area agencies on aging, and from federal into sort of the Medicare plans. A lot of the money originates with the government as it flows into this category. So understanding whether that's going to be important to the strategy of your business, and then figuring out how, right? So is it going to be at the state level? Is it going to be more at the local level? And then starting to build sort of lists of contacts, and then figuring out what type of problem you want to help them solve. Because almost universally, if you're talking to government, you reach people at, say, the local area agency, they're always resource strapped, they're always cash strapped. You have to call them being able to help them solve a real tangible problem fairly quickly and fairly easily. And then they have the time to talk to you. If you are a generic solution and they don't know where to plug you in, and you're quite expensive, and it's sort of a longer upfront explanation and commitment, then I think you have to detune that because you haven't really sort of matched your message with your audience. But if you think about those things, you'll have a little more success with governments than you would otherwise.
And John?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and Richard, I have to say that my engaging was pretty much what you thought. It's difficult. Why do it? That, be an executive in residence, a research grant giving organization. And I think when I got introduced to what NIA was thinking through Furlong's conference and hearing Todd, it becomes a culture issue. What's the culture inside of NIH now, and where is it leading to? I think COVID not only was a big wake up call for business and how we do business and every other part of our lives, I think that was a really life enhancement question for NIH globally. And I think the idea of innovation became front and center, and it's percolating both digital health and quality of life. It's percolating through all the divisions and conversations I'm in. I'm fascinated. I mean, when you think about the allocation of $130 million of non-dilutive financing a year, IA only, and $1.2 billion a year globally, that money's going to get allocated, and it's going to get allocated to innovative ideas and projects. So it's not something you can't get. Now, there's rigor and protocol and arrangements to make that avenue happen, but entrepreneurs have gone up harder hills for less successful efforts than that, and me being one of them. And I think it's incredible to help investors believe in the company, non-dilutive financing. But the key thing is they're creating real IP, and even around service models, it's really intellectual property and discovery. and it's proven stuff. It's not, I think it works. It's here, it's coming, because in phase one, it did work. I'm just really impressed, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity, and I'm having a blast. It's great.
And let me go even bigger than that and talk about global. I wonder, and maybe Eric, you can start on this, and then Lawrence, since you've had some success with partnering globally, how much harder is it to do a partnership globally? And do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who are thinking about doing that? Eric?
Yeah, I guess we've done several partnerships with startups that are overseas. Our focus, though, primarily is the States, because Nationwide is a US based company only. And so, I'd say, to be candid, most of the founders that we've worked with know exactly what they need to do. They're very knowledgeable of the States. They know what's going on here and what they need to get here. So it's not any different, at least for us, than dealing with anybody, sort of in the US. So, kind of the same things: building good relationships, being persistent, being patient, showing the value prop, like all the things that you would normally expect. We've seen anyway.
Lawrence, is anything different for you when you're going global, other than maybe speaking a different language?
Yes, there are some things to consider. Assuming that you're going to choose, say, countries that are more Western in how they think about this problem, and they have sort of more established sort of payment and reimbursement mechanisms, those conversations will be similar to the types of partnership conversations you've had in the US. But as soon as you get outside that sort of category, and I'll use India as an example, sort of breaking into that market, the problem that we're solving may be similar, but the way we'll partner and the way we'll monetize the business will be different. So it forced us to think about, how we would partner locally, how we would support that partnership, and the different sort of problem and opportunity as part of those conversations. So it's no less sort of interesting, exciting, and lucrative, but it was a different conversation because it's a different problem in a different market.
You also hire people with experience in opening new markets. So now that we've had Uber as a success, we have people that have worked for Uber. And I had someone tell me one day, we would go to South Africa. If we couldn't open that market in 3 hours, we just move on to the next country. So there are people who have relationships in building global marketplaces.
Mary, it's funny that you mentioned that, because one of our early angel investors was number 12 at Uber. And she's an Indian lady. She lives in Mumbai. And she was the one that encouraged us to expand into international markets earlier than a startup otherwise would have. It's unusual for a company that's less than a year old to go and do that. But she said, hey, let me give this a try, because she was the one who launched Uber internationally and pushed them into different markets. And if you all recall, it was not easy to launch Uber into some of those markets. It was heavily resisted, and it was a heavily regulated industry. So she has sort of the chops, the muscle memory, and knows how to do this. And so she's been incredibly helpful in allowing us to hire her locally. She lives and sits in Mumbai, and has been able to sort of expand partnerships incredibly faster than we would do it if we had to do it from here.
I want to go to one last question from the audience, and then I may have time for one or two more, and then we'll wrap. There's a question, I think I would say it's probably for Eric and Lawrence, which is, what advice would you offer on which group of senior communities are the right target for telehealth live video platform adoptions for movement and exercise? She says many facilities have low internet speed, seniors don't have computers. Do you have any advice on how to improve tech adoption in these communities, or are they just not the right communities to target? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I'll be happy to address it. I mean, I think infrastructure and bandwidth is the number one challenge for technology going into senior living communities. We have a highly fragmented, skilled nursing world, and then most of them have combinations with independent living. I would tell you it's being worked on, but if you have a bandwidth problem, I would not choose that to be your highest priority. I do think there are plenty of communities, and there are plenty of companies like CDW that are doing infrastructure plays that are allowing these communities to come up to speed, but I'll get there. The problem is some of them, the configuration and they're made out of, they have dead spots, and that's just the nature of the beast. But it seems like a movement, scenario would be assisted living. I can't imagine at least a recent assisted living, which is a relatively new trend in housing, does not have pretty good internet speed. But I think that's a good qualifying question to save their time.
My last question, and then I will turn it over to Mary and to Fred, is what is one big mistake that you've seen entrepreneurs make when they want to partner with you, and how can entrepreneurs avoid making that mistake? Eric, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this. It's sort of estimating the time of, especially a large financial institution's sort of timing of a commercial agreement. We tend to tell folks it's probably 24 to 36 months out, though you'll see, many pipelines that show things within 6 months. And it's just, again, as Mary mentioned, all the regulatory issues that we have to deal with, all the processes internally, building the business case. So, I think that's probably the one that we see the most often, is sort of being a little aggressive in the timing.
Lawrence, are there any mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making for partnering that you would tell them to be careful about?
Yes, and I'm sure I probably make them all the time. I think that you want to filter for alignment. So if you're trying to create something that's short, immediate, where you get fast signal before you decide to sort of go into a deeper partnership, have those conversations on the front end. Try to align on what you're trying to get, what they're hoping to get, and put sort of a good, tight kind of definition around that, so that everybody's trying to do the same thing against the same timelines.
Thank you. This has been a great panel. I want to thank everybody for joining us at the What's Next Longevity Business Academy. I hope you found the session, The Power of Partnerships, as informative as I did. And let me turn things over to Mary to finish us up. Thank you.
I would just say great insights across the board. One of the spirits of this longevity marketplace, entrepreneurs and partners, is that they share with one another. So really listen to what the people said here today on the panel, and then go back and listen to some of the other sessions, because it is like an MBA in the longevity market, really, to learn these lessons. And if you're interested in the venture side, sign up so you can hear what the VCs are saying about the market. Over to you, Sherry.
I just thought that was a fantastic panel. Thank you so much to everybody. Just want to remind you that you have access to both this session as well as all the other sessions and boot camps through July 31st. And we have one more week to go with a fantastic session to wrap us up next week. And as Mary said, what I find interesting listening to all of this is that this session reminded me of a couple other sessions we had around content and user design and how to have a successful pilot. So they really are all kind of integrated in terms of helping you learn about how to be successful in the longevity economy. So thank you all for today.
And Fred.
Thank you, Mary and Sherry. And of course, thank you to Richard, Lawrence, John, and Eric. And there is still more to come, so be sure to join us next Tuesday live at 1 p.m. Eastern. Our topic will be the epidemic of social isolation and loneliness, post-COVID solutions. And a reminder that the What's Next Longevity Venture Summit is coming up June 16th and 17th. You won't want to miss that. We want to say thank you to our sponsors, AARP Innovation Labs, Ageless Innovation, CareLinks, Caregiving Club, Home Instead, IN2L, Nationwide, and VitalTech. Remember, you can check the full agenda of what's ahead at maryfurlong.com/academy. Thanks for being with us, and please help to spread the word.